This is the Draft Season Podcast. It is your boy Young Raz coming live from Beverly Hills, California. I got my player partner with me, Sean 5K. We got a lot to talk about today. The NBA draft is yesterday. Sean, talk to him real quick.
Draft night 2022, man. A lot of shit happened last night. There's a lot of stuff to recap. A lot of destination landing spots we gotta talk about. We gotta talk about fuck. I mean, shit. Starting at number one, it was a crazy day with Paolo. We also gotta talk about Keegan Murray at four. What the fuck the Knicks did, and everything. So I mean, without further ado, we could just get into the show. But I mean, Raz, we are both huge Paolo Banchero fans, and we both have super good outlooks. And I think the difficult part about this draft, and even making the final big boards for this actual draft, is especially among the top three for most people on their board when it comes to Paolo, Jabari, and Chet. You can make a strong argument, and this wasn't a draft that had a consensus number one. And shout out to the Magic for playing the actual. They pulled the okey doke on everybody, which was kind of incredible. And it just kind of brings one of those things up into the conversation about none of these things we don't know nearly as much as we think we do. And the Magic just threw us for that turn. So I mean, starting off at the top of the draft and Paolo, like, what were your live reactions to seeing Paolo go number one? And then we could speak about the fit long term in Orlando now.
I think seeing Paulo go number one, I mean, it felt right. I think as you looked at your draft board, everybody, like you said, had those three consensus players that were all four or fives, whatever they're gonna play in the next position at the next level. And I think Paulo is somebody, when you looked at him in college, that NBA frame was already on him. Um, that offensive skill set with a hint of playmaking and just the actual physical sheer domination like that he has. Like, he's a grown man. So I thought he was the most pro ready out of the three at the top of the board, and the Magic didn't even work him out. And so if you were one of those
That's the
people
wild part.
that, yeah, that's the one. I mean, they looked at the film and said we saw what we had to see. And they didn't work him out. So if you were one of those people that put a little piece of change on that Paulo going number one, you did pretty well, because the odds were pretty good at that point. I think it was like plus 1,400 before they took it down. So you did well there, and I think just you know this is an interesting tactic going forward. Are we going to see more teams kind of smokescreen that way, not working out the players that they want and taking them? I mean, there's risk involved with that, but I do think sometimes at these workouts, some of these GMs overthink it because somebody can have a bad workout that day. So I mean, you got to look into it like that. But I don't see. I had Paulo number one on my board, so this is exactly how I thought it should have went. And congratulations to him and his family. And I think he's going to be a good NBA player going forward.
So what do you make of the fit in Orlando? Obviously, they have, I think, the combination of him to go along with Wendell Carter. They have a bunch of guards. So it's interesting to see them zag at this point. But just in terms of the fit, what do you make of how he's going to step on the court and fit with those guys? We don't know if Jonathan Isaac is actually going to be a part of that long-term core. We don't know if he still plays basketball. We don't know if he's on a traveling,
I
pastor
think
tour of, anti-vax and abortion rights. I don't know. He's probably out there at one of those.
yeah, he's
you know,
probably he
he's
probably
probably
a Supreme
celebrating the
Court
Roe.
booster right now. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
probably celebrating the Roe versus Wade decision somewhere in the world today. So, I mean, but what do we make of his fit in Orlando? And we talk about they had a bunch of guards on that team, and there's a lot you can do with Paolo itself and run the offense from him in the mid post, and also other ways since they do have other passers in Jalen Suggs, Markel Fultz. There's a lot of high character guys, a lot of guys who have high feel for the game, and can play in versatile functions. But how do you think it's going to look on court though?
I think on court, I mean, it's still left to be seen. I have to see how everybody comes back healthy. Obviously, Fultz is something on that team where I think he needs to be the engine. That kind of gets the offense going. Rookies on that team last year had a pretty rough year. Suggs was pretty injured last year too. So this team right now needs to get healthy. That's piece one. Everybody needs to be healthy so we can see the sum of all these parts on the court at once. Now, Paulo, I think once he gets going, he should be a focal point of that offense. I don't know if the offense needs to run 100% through him, but he's going to be somebody that's going to demand a lot of attention on this team, just with his offensive versatility. And if he's going to play at that 4 with Wendell Carter at that 5, I mean, there's so like this team has so many different pieces. I think before we even get into what it looks like on the court, we have to see who's going to be there at the beginning of the season. There's, like you said, Jonathan Isaac, is Mo Bamba returning? Like what are these
I mean, I would
roster
assume
spots?
no on Bamba.
Well,
I
Mo,
think he's
yeah, I
probably out of
mean,
there.
so if Bamba's out of there, obviously you're running it with Wendell Carter and Paulo. Those are your 4 and 5. Jonathan Isaac, is he an off the bench piece? I mean, because a couple years ago he was looking like he was going to be their defensive 4 that guards a bunch of positions. I think if he's playing and he's healthy, he's a valuable asset on that team. But that comes down to if they want to pay him as well. And then at the guard position, are they going to run that 2 guard set with Fultz and Suggs? Like what is their
That's not
plan
enough.
there? And then
Yeah, like
there's not enough.
now go ahead, Russ, 'cause that's what I was thinking. Like in terms of just like Fultz and
And then they
Suggs.
still have Wagner.
No, Wagner he's probably the second most important piece on
Yeah,
this team, and I think his function on that team and playing off of Paulo, he's probably the best shooter on that team right now that you could probably build around. But I think the Fultz and Cole Anthony thing kind of just comes down to like, is not enough spacing? Like this team still kind of needs some shooting. Which, if we're just talking about shooters, I would probably say like out of the guys that they were playing last year, like you'd probably say like Wagner was definitely like their best shooter, and then like, and I'm not assuming Terrence Ross has been on the Magic for like a decade, it seems like, but
I think this is the last go around for him. I think he's going to get traded this
he's not a
offseason.
part of the long time.
Yeah,
He's not a part of the long term core. But the spacing on that team is going to be interesting. But one thing I think my final point, at least on the Magic, is it's just I'm glad that they went this way, as opposed to going with Chet or Jabari, because what this team needed some offensive spunk, and it needed an identity, and it needed a true offensive alpha. And Paulo probably has the biggest potential to be that guy, and particularly from day one. Now, the pieces alongside that core definitely still needs to be worked out, and they're going to need a lot more actual shooting along them. The spacing is going to be disgusting with Cole, and I mean Cole's probably their third best shooter on that team alongside Bamba, but it's going to be interesting. So I mean, number 2 pick, obviously, we can go to OKC, or if you just want to talk about winners and losers in the draft in general, and then we can get to team by team. How do you want to do that?
I think we can get into some of the winners. I think everybody knows how it went, so let's see who we thought some of the winners. And I think, unfortunately, it kind of goes in order right here, right? I think Oklahoma City was one of the winners of the draft, and we often see on this show they don't deserve nice things. Presley down there is running whatever he's running, a Ponzi
You
scheme,
say
but
that.
I mean, huh?
You say they don't deserve nice things. Yeah, they definitely
don't.
running the Ponzi scheme over there.
They absolutely don't deserve nice things. I mean, but to get Chet, to get Usman like at 2 and 11, because of the goddamn Knicks, I think long term, obviously Chet's potential is incredible. It's left to be seen what he can do in terms of filling out that body type, but I think just defensively right now he's a plus. He's able to protect the rim, and he's somebody I think that they have a future in. I don't know if they're gonna run him besides Poku. That would be insane. I might have to do that in 2K. We might have to stream that for the viewers to see that, because that'd be nuts. But when you look at Usman, that's a long-term play for them, and I think as a team that we're kind of in perpetuity looking at long-term wise, I think at some point it has to start shaping up. So he might be a little bit longer of a project for them, but I think the rest of the pieces they have on this team already, adding Chet to it, just in the first round, those are wins. And then if you start looking at the latter part of their draft, like taking flyers on those players, I think they're this house money right now for the Thunder, because if one of them hit, like, you have a bona fide roster on that and out there in Oklahoma.
Yeah, it's going to be the long term fit will be interesting. I think we're all huge fans of Josh Giddey. I'm not sure if it'll be interesting to see the long term fit between him and Shea, but just in general, the combination of Shea and Giddey and Chet, I think Chet is going to be interesting because Chet's long term potential as just an offensive creator, which he didn't really get to explore at Gonzaga, just because he was cool playing that role. And I had Chet as my number one option. I'm my number one guy on my board, obviously. So I just think the floor is incredibly high for him as a player, and he's just kind of scratching the surface of his potential as an offensive player. But when we talk about the actual fit and what they're going to do, because I mean, long term, I mean, just on their team next year, obviously, I think the four starters that they're going to have, we're probably looking at Shea, Giddey, and Chet alongside with probably Lou Dort, who's in that fifth slot. Depends to be seen who's kind of going to play the four on that role, or if they want to bring in a different center to play with Chet earlier. But what, obviously, in huge Jalen Williams fan, both of them actually, because they actually have, they cornered the market on Jalen Williams. But what do you think this team is missing just long term about that next step? Because obviously you have a all-star piece, all-star cornerstone. One of the best pieces from last year in terms of Josh Giddey is just, exceeding expectations in the lottery for a lot of people. And you kind of just have, a bunch of other darts on that team. But what do you think this team is still missing long term? Because like if they're tanking next year in the Wembayama sweepstakes, the optics of that are going to look horrendous. But
yeah,
just like what is this team still missing before, and like how good do you think, or how close do you think this team is on this timeline? Sam Presti still has like a billion picks, so like you would like to think when you chose 3 lottery picks this year, you want to think after you have an all-star cornerstone, you have Chet, but is this team actually closer to being competitive in the Western Conference? I think last year we were talking about their defense. They should have all the tendencies and all the building blocks that they're gonna actually need to be a strong defense. Like starting next year, it's gonna remain to be seen. Is there enough shooting? Is there enough self-creation besides Shea? That's kind of the big question with Giddey in terms of how good of a scorer. We know how good of a passer he is, and just in terms of his playmaking. But when it comes to his finishing, which I do think he took a leap last year, in his rookie season, but there's still a long way for him to go as a shooter and even a finisher, if he's going to be your second or third option on that. But, hypothetically, what is this team still missing though to you?
I mean, one of my favorite sayings is they're a year away from being a year away. So they're probably in that batch right there. They're probably 2 years away from being real competitive. I mean, I don't think they're going to be this year a pushover as they were last year. But I mean, the West is a very stacked conference, and pieces are still moving. So there's left to be seen there. I think they need a strong four, and probably a wing as well. I mean, they have Lou Dort. Big Lou Dort fan on this show. We love Lou Dort on this show, but is he a piece that's going to be there for the long term for them? I'm left to be seen there. I mean, just have to see what the direction of this roster is going to shape up to. Like even in free agency, are they going to deal more picks? Like what is left to be seen there? So I do think they do need a four, just because their bigs are light in the ass. If we're gonna be honest, like their fives are thin, real thin, and they're gonna need somebody with a little bit more mass on their body to bang down low. So they need a four. I'm not sure it has to be a scoring option, but somebody who's a physical presence and that helps with some of that defensive load down there.
So I mean, we could get into the Rockets at 3, and it's kind of just interesting because, like I said, I had the top 3, top 4. They're all in the first tier for me. So Jabbar going 3 and his fit in Houston is going to be pretty interesting, just about how that actually ended up. And because I love the fit, I honestly.
Yeah,
and they also picked up Tari Eason, another guy who we'll get to shortly. But Jabari in Houston, what did you make of that pick? And just in general, shout out to Jabari's mama. Neither here nor there. But what else did you make of just the fit and how Houston's pieces are coming together now?
Houston looks fun on paper, man. They got a lot of young legs out there. If KPJ and Jalen Green trying to get their minds right, that's very explosive. Then you look into Sengun, who's somebody that I liked coming out of the draft last year, and he's somebody that they traded Christian Wood, and they're making space out there for these bigs to play. So if you're gonna run with those two, Jalen Green, KPJ. Then you have Jabari and Sengun. They're gonna trade Eric Gordon. He's not gonna be on this roster. So it's one of those things where this is the youth movement right now, and they have the horses. And I think it's all about now growing with them together. And if you start looking at just even the other parts of this draft class, like you said, like they kind of went and got a point guard that fell very late. You know, we could talk about that now. We can talk about it later. But you know, Ty was somebody that at the early onset of the draft cycle, he was probably a top 20 player, and he fell to 29. So could be some value there. They do need somebody who's kind of be a table setter and kind of a playmaker there to kind of center some of those centers, the wings that they have, and kind of get, you know, them into the offense. So I mean, I think Houston's going to be fun down the line. They also have all of Brooklyn Nets picks due to that trade. So Houston's a team that's going to be on the rise at some point soon, because they definitely have the young talent there.
Yeah, shout out to Rafael Stone. I'm loving what he's putting together in Houston, honestly, because we talk about Sengun and just the long-term fit, and you put a couple of just guys next to him with extremely good just perimeter defense, and they move their feet extremely well. Not even talking about Garuba, but just Tari Eason and Jabari. Jabari needs to be with guys who can pass, so the fit with him and Sengun is going to be extremely good. Just in terms of also him playing off of Jalen Green, who has the gravity to be a 30-point scorer in this league if he hits his potential. You know, the Tata fit, I think Tata is also going to fit really well over there next to a guy like Jalen Green. You know, we spoke about this before, just about with Tata. Like, I was extremely impressed with his defense in general. So the defense, I think he's going to be able to guard ones and, you know, be able to be a versatile defender who can, you know, you can throw him on twos. He is longer than I think people gave him credit for. Tata is, so that's also going to be another positive for him on that end. And you know, Tari Eason, he's insane just to watch. Like, he's an extreme ball of energy. He's a chaos creator on defense. He blows up plays. He's extremely strong. You know, I think they're going to be able to have, you know, even with a Sengun, what Sengun does just in terms of weak side rim protection, those lineups where they are playing with Sengun, or you can have guys with Sengun, Jabari, and Tari, and you're going to be able to have extremely versatile lineups who you're going to have offensive punch. I think Tari is going to shoot it long term. I also do think Sengun, we talk about his potential to be an offensive hub and, you know, operate out of the mid post and make extremely good reads. There's going to be a lot. It's going to be, like I said, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. You as a young team, we don't want to end up in that situation to where, like, what are we doing here? What is the direction here? Who are the true cornerstone guys? And for Houston, just being, 2 years removed from the James Harden experience and James Harden asking out to get to go to Brooklyn. So I think they're in a great position. They're also going to be able to start, you know, supplementing the roster with vets eventually. And we're talking about a team that they're probably like they're definitely like one pick away or one more year of, like, let's say a premier blue chip prospect away and some additional, you know, vets and free agent guys from this team. I think they're going to be able to compete sooner than people think. The West is extremely tough, and I think that's going to get into the next team here on the board, which is the Sacramento Kings. And Raz, you spoke earlier about the Paolo not working out for the Magic at any point, and the Magic just saying, you know, F it, he's our number one prospect. He's the guy that we want to build around, and he's the guy that we think can unlock the rest of the guys that we have on this team. And, you know, the Kings are going into I don't know what has it been, like 16, 17 years of the Kings not making the playoffs. It's been a minute since
a rebuild since Chris Webber left, man.
That Mike Bibby Pager team. Like, Vladdy's been out the league for a minute, and they have not made the playoffs. Barely even came close in, like, most seasons. Like, they're damn near pretty much the perennial cellar dwellers in the Western Conference. But
yes,
I mean, I don't want to besmirch Keegan Murray because I'm a huge Keegan Murray fan. I think he's going to be able to come into the league, and, you know, we said it on the Keegan Murray video about thinking he's an underrated prospect, and, you know, people just because the draft community is ageist and, you know, not necessarily loving him or the long-term upside because, you know, he's going to be like 21 or 22, I think, by the time the season starts. But this was even more than Paolo going number one. This was the number one most surprising thing for on draft night, honestly. Just, you know, because we talk about the Kings, and I guess we have to have a conversation about, like, where this roster is, where are we at on De'Aaron Fox? If I was running the Kings, I probably would have just taken Jaden Ivey, and I would have traded De'Aaron Fox. That's just me personally. I think, you have two young guards that I think can kind of, approximate what De'Aaron Fox is going to give you. And if you were to move him and get more pieces on that team, I think you would be able to still get really good production from your guards, and also, bring even more, production in the wings and whatever, however you want to build around that core you have. But I'm not in the Kings front office. That's not what they chose. Keegan Murray has a lot of things to be a fan of, just in terms of his fit. So where the hell are we at on the Kings? The Western Conference is extremely hard. So it's hard for me to look at the Kings and say, this was the piece that is going to put them over the top. They played well down the stretch. Before, I think, the couple games after the deadline, they did get to play in. They showed some signs, but we're still talking about a team that is going to be fighting for the play-in. And, I guess, if they make a play-in, that's probably an accomplishment for the Kings at this point. But what did you make of the Keegan Murray pick? What did you make of, and where the hell are we at on the Kings? And this kind of just feels like a disappointing pick. And then by the trade deadline, they might end up selling off a guy like Harrison Barnes and then end up in the lottery again next year, unfortunately. But where are we at on this? And what was your reaction to Keegan going forward?
Well, I mean, I figured he was gonna go 4, just at the point where they weren't accepting any trades for that 4th pick, right? And then you go to the point where they traded Halliburton, which chaos, whatever. They traded Halliburton last year. So are they gonna bring in another guard to be in that same spot again as we get to the trade deadline? I didn't think they were that dumb to do that, and that's a glowing recommendation and glowing words from me for the Kings, because they're bad at what they do. Keegan Murray is a fine prospect. He's a very good player. He's somebody that's going to be a good NBA player. But this roster fit right now is kind of wacky. It's one of those things where Harrison Barnes is still there. He's eating up those same minutes that Keegan would need. You obviously have Sabonis, who is now the focal point of that team with Fox. Richaun Holmes is still in the fold for now.
He's getting traded.
I mean, we'll see. We'll see if anybody's going to take a flyer on him, and what are they going to get back for Richaun Holmes on a trade? That's my thing. Are you going to run Sabonis out there at the 5? Because if that's what you're doing, then this team. Yeah. I mean, if Sabonis is their 5, we're talking about them in the lottery again. So let's be clear. We could get to the 2023 draft cycle for the Kings right now if they're running Sabonis out there on the 5, because it's defensively is not going to be good enough. And if you're going to run him at the 5, and then I'm assuming Keegan at the 4, that's not a good enough front court in this Western Conference for them to make the playoffs. So it's you got a good prospect on this team. You got to find room for him to play and a position for them to play. So you're going to have to ship out 2 of those vets. So that's left to be seen on where and how they get rid of Harrison Barnes and or Richaun Holmes to get him the playing time that he needs. And then at the end of the day, they probably still need a wing to complement everything else.
And this team doesn't have enough shooting for me to I think there's a pieces in. I've never been the biggest Domantas Sabonis fan, partly because of his defense. He's not the worst defender, and he has improved on that end as he has been in the career. But he spent a lot of his time playing with Miles Turner in that front court and in Indy. Yep. And even when he was in OKC, he also played with extremely good. He spent some time playing with Steven Adams. So is he really an anchor big defensively? No. Just in general, I don't see that being the best way to really, just optimize his production. Now, even the thing about the shooting is, the Halliburton deal, and they also traded they also traded Buddy Hield in that deal. So it comes down to, it's just who's the best shooter on that team? Off the top of my head, it's probably Harrison Barnes, and it'll be interesting to see what they're gonna do, just in terms of how else they choose to add to this team in free agency with on that team, since they're really wanting to win. But yeah, man, they're asking a lot from this team and putting the players in a tough position, because I don't think in a great world that team makes the playoffs next year, but you just passed up on one of the most explosive talents in this class, somebody who has the potential to just go full inferno and become. He has like Jaden Ivey has the potential to be the best player in this draft. Like it's in his realm of possibilities, just in terms of who he could be. So I understand why they didn't want to, and they seem to be committed to De'Aaron Fox heavily on that side. But that's kind of my thing is that like, what if this doesn't go right for them, and what are we doing next year if this doesn't go? If we have another disappointing year, or even if they top out as a 8 or a 9 seed, so it's just like long term. I just don't get the direction of that team and what they're doing. But number 5, man, favorite fits. Obviously, this one was just easy. You didn't need to be a rocket scientist to love this fit.
Nope.
Jaden Ivey to the Detroit Pistons, man. Like, where are we at on that? The Pistons, I have a hot take. I think they're like 2 years away from winning a playoff series. That's how much I believe in Cade Cunningham. I think, by like year 3, year 4, I think Cade is going to be good enough to win playoff series with a good core around him. But Jaden Ivey, number 5, shout out to his agency, not working out for the Kings, whether that helped them, get them off of him, not pick him, not deal with that. At the end of the day, it worked out for him, and he ended up in a incredible position. But what do you make of just the Pistons long-term, their core, and Jaden Ivey at 5?
Jaden Ivey at 5 is, to Detroit was something that, I think that's one of the best picks of the draft. You sit there and you go him and Cade long-term as a backcourt, just the endless possibilities of them alternating between ball handler, scorer. They have the ability to pick up on the defensive end as well. Jaden Ivey's going to have to become a much better defender, but if he becomes a neutral to positive on the defensive end alongside Cade, like that backcourt's going to be giving the Eastern Conference like nightmares as they mature into the grown men bodies that they'll have and to the NBA players that they eventually will be. I think, another thing that they got, obviously Jalen Duren, shout out to the Knicks again. They have a center now. And, we spoke glowingly about Jalen Duren. He's somebody who is a grown man at his young age already. He, on my board, he was top 10. And he fell to, 12 or 13. So they got their center of the future as well. Like that core is kind of, you're kind of solidifying that. And then, they went full on youth movement, getting rid of, Jeremy Grant. And shout out to him because he did get his bag and, maybe he'll get to chase some playing games with Dame out there. But, I think the way that the Detroit Pistons have set themselves up for the future, like you said, like they're a team that in the next 2 or 3 years, like these young boys are going to be ready to go.
Yeah, just the difference in just the combination that Duren's going to have going from that Memphis team to playing with a guy like Cade Cunningham and even another guard with the downhill just aggressiveness that Jaden Ivey is going to possess. He's going to be really, life is going to be really easy for Jalen Duren. That probably takes them out of the DeAndre Ayton sweepstakes. But when we get into Jalen Duren, he's somebody who we talk about. A lot of people just talking about, how easy it is to find a center and, not wanting to take centers in the top 10, but which is fair to a point, and not to discredit the philosophy in general, but guys like Jalen Duren and the upside that he does possess defensively, I think that's probably the biggest part, because guys that he can be a true franchise defensive center for that team. And we're talking about somebody who is going to have the potential to be a high level rim protector. He's going to have he's not one of these centers that you have to worry about being played off the court in the postseason. The offense with Jalen Duren is really not like, he showed a lot of his offensive bag. The touch is going to have to improve with him. The footwork is also going to have to improve with him. But that's not the appeal of Jalen Duren. Anything you get from him offensively is going to be a plus. I think he's going to be definitely overqualified and just overqualified for sure to play that Robert Williams role. He sets incredible screens. Cade is going to be able to find him as that vertical lob threat. So that's just something to be so. The Pistons definitely had one of the best drafts. Definitely, it's real easy to fall in love with what they had. Saddiq Bey also is going to be. They have floor spacers. Yep. I'm glad that it kind of worked out perfectly because Troy Weaver. The Killian Hayes pick obviously is not going to work out.
Boy.
But like I said, I said it a while. I said it early. I was just like, I probably would have tried and got off of Killian as soon as possible. But he's kind of going to be. I think he's going to be in a better position to be optimized on that team. Like he put him because I think that's his best role for him right now, since he's not offensive threat at all, and he is kind of passive on that end and doesn't really look for a shot. And teams don't really respect his shot at all on offense, which makes which kind of just downplays his playmaking ability that he does have. So playing him as that third guard, who you can run, he's more defensive. I think even his fit when even if you slide Cade up to a forward slot, and you will be able to run out lineups with Cade, Killian, and Jaden Ivey. Jaden Ivey is going to need another. Cade can guard forwards. You can put him on forwards, and Jaden Ivey is going to need another guard who can actually defend with him. And long term, is he long term for Detroit? Probably not. But if they're going to try and get some type of value out of him, or raise his value before trying to trade him, I think even he's going to be in a better position for that. So it'll be interesting to see what else they try to add to that team. But we could bounce around a little bit after just the top 5. So, I mean, winners and losers, like what teams had your favorite drafts in general?
I mean, ironically, we could stay in order. I think the Indiana Pacers, one of my favorite drafts of the night. Benedict at 6, a little high for my blood, ironically, but it's like he's kind of the wing that they're looking for in terms of playing off of somebody like Tyrese Halliburton. I think that's going to fit very well. And then just the second round pieces that they got, I think they did a great job in the second round. I think Nembhard, that's a great backup point guard. I mean, and I know that the prototypical backup point guard is not really a position right now in the NBA that is plentiful, but I do think he has some good traits there. And then Kendall Brown, the flyer on him falling all the way to 48, which was nuts to me. I think he is a wing that's going to have great upside. He's athletic as hell, and he is somebody that's still finding himself in terms of offensively. I think he'll be able to contribute right away defensively. Indiana's all in right now on a rebuild, and I think they've got some solid pieces with those 3 picks.
Yeah, so I think just a couple other of our favorite drafts. We can go back and forth on just some of our favorite draft classes at this point. I wanted to say shout out to the Spurs draft in general. They took Jeremy Sohan a little higher than I had him on my board, but I understand the allure. I'm not even like, I think there's potential for him to fit in really well. I think him next to a guy like, they're going to be able to throw out some really, really scrappy lineups defensively. Where we already talk about Jakob Poeltl, is he going to stay in San Antonio? They didn't take a center in this draft, so let's assume that he does for now. And they get they re-sign him to a reasonable deal. You have a guy like Jakob Poeltl who is he's an elite rim protector, so that's a building block right there. You're going to be able to play Sohan at the 4. You could put him next to guys like Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell on that lineup. Those two are going to be able to switch everything. We're talking about elite rim protection, switchable forwards who are going to be able to take advantage of, or just cause havoc on that side. But I think what they did in this draft, and the Spurs, one of the biggest rumors and just actual trade rumors that hit the web and hit the NBA Twitter over the past couple days, the couple hours that preceded the actual NBA draft is, I don't know how much viability is there to Dejounte Murray being available. But I still do think long term, Dejounte had an incredible year, and he's one of the best defensive guards, point attack defenders in the league. Definitely somebody that you can build around. Now, considering that you have him as somebody who needs the ball in his hands, since he isn't a great shooter, they're kind of just taking they took, considering the 2 guys that they got in the 20s between Blake Wesley and Malachi Branham to go along with a guy like Josh Primo who they got. They're starting to just kind of off of one of those guys. It's kind of just going to be who else ends up developing the best to play alongside a guy like Dejounte Murray, because all those guys have potential to kind of be that off-ball kind of scorer who can put the ball in the basket, and they all have the ability. I'm a huge Malachi Branham fan. We're talking about somebody who just has that ability to be a really good scorer and fill somebody who has potential to be a 3-level scorer. He also is going to be able a really good touch and his ability. He's not somebody who's going to need the ball a lot, and you just see how crafty he is for a freshman and how that's going to develop. Josh Primo is another guy who I expect to turn into somebody who's going to be able to average you like 15 plus points a game. I think he's going to be able to shoot it. And now you are able, I don't know what the hell is going to happen with Lonnie Walker. He's somebody who, if I kind of need a guard, you can only develop so many players at once, which is kind of the same position that OKC is kind of in when you take a bunch of these guys. So, like, is Lonnie Walker who's somebody who's going to be available to get a sign and trade? They took 2 other guards who's playing his position, so you might think it's gonna there's definitely going to be a limit since he's restricted about what the Spurs will match on that side. But the Spurs definitely had one of my favorite drafts in general. So, I don't know how long Pop is going to be there to see that rebuild happen, but those are the type of swings that you need to take. And just considering roster construction, those are the type of guys that probably can bring you surplus value on that roster. If, like you said, they get lauded for having a great developmental staff, and those 2 guys are probably going to be the most important, because the Spurs are probably going to be too good to end up in the top 5 and truly get one of these premier prospects. Pop isn't tanking. They don't have a bottom 5 roster in terms of talent. They're kind of just missing. I don't think Dejounte Murray is a number 1. Is he a number 2? I think that's kind of debatable. I probably think he's perfect in a number 3 slot next to 2 other guys or better offensive machines that can get the best out of him. So they're still missing those pieces, but Malachi Branham, Josh Primo, and even Blake Wesley, who have a lot of potential on that side, those are the type of right swings that the Spurs need to be taking. So I think they had an incredible draft.
Yeah, I mean, I think one more. I also ask you how you feel about it as well, but the Pelicans going Dyson Daniels at 8. I love that pick for them. I think that's somebody that once he develops, I don't know how long CJ is going to be out there in New Orleans, but I assume he's there for the foreseeable future. If Dyson Daniels can develop into that lead ball handler and kind of just distribute off of those weapons that they have, because this team, when they're fully healthy, if Zion, Ingram is Ingram, and CJ's there, they have some buckets there. He's somebody that wouldn't have to shoulder an offensive load. He would kind of just have to run the offense. And then EJ Liddell fall into 41, and you kind of picking him up there. He's obviously kind of a dinosaur in terms of, he's undersized for his position, and he's kind of just that prototypical Big Ten power forward that we gotten so used to seeing. But he's somebody that he's going to provide good depth for them on that front line. He's probably not going to see as many minutes early into his NBA career, but injuries happen. He's somebody that's going to provide great depth for them.
Yeah, EJ Fallen was probably one of the more surprising things that I feel like a lot of people, me included, had him graded as a first-round pick. I can kind of understand why some teams might have been a little skeptical on taking a swing on EJ Liddell in the first round, just in terms of he is, supreme role player who, I think he also is somebody who shows a really high feel for the game, which I do think him and Dyson are going to bring. I think athletically, he's not the best athlete, and I think EJ is going to shoot it. I think he does have pretty good touch that he did show developed over his time at Ohio State. So I think I kind of understand why he didn't take. I think like he would have been a cool first round pick, and if you were like starved for that type of forward who can be be a versatile defender and give you some weak side rim protection, I can understand why you would have taken him in the first round. But as a second round pick, that's a great pick. And I like the Pelicans. I remember after the trade they had last year for Jonas Valanciunas, and just in general with some of the moves that David Griffin was making previously, it wasn't looking great previously. But a year later, and just the piece that they're putting around their core, and I think it's going to be interesting to see if CJ McCollum gets an extension. But Dyson Daniels playing off a guy like CJ is incredible for Dyson because he's not where he needs to be as a shooter. Now Dyson is going to be able to play some extremely funky and versatile lineups that the actual the burden of responsibility is going to be able to switch from everybody depending on who's on the court. Dyson's going to be able to play in lineups with a guy like Jose Alvarado. It's going to be extremely hard for ball handlers with the amount of pressure that those two guys are going to bring. We haven't even mentioned a guy like Herb Jones, who is another guy who's going to pester the ball extremely well. Shout out to Herbert Jones, and then you got guys like Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, and Zion, who, for as good of offensive talents that they are, those are offensive first guys. And Zion does have potential to be a solid defender. I think Brandon Ingram, when he's locked in, also has potential to be a solid defender. But those aren't guys, considering the load that they're going to carry on offense, that you're probably going to expect to really exert that much energy. But, all in all, the Pelicans are going to be tough, and it'll be interesting to see what else they add to this team in free agency. But there's a world where like that team is like a top 4 or 5 seed in the West next year. That wouldn't really be surprising. Zion missed the whole year, so I don't think it's going to put him in like comeback player of the year, just because he missed a full season. Because I think he kind of established himself as an all-star level guy the year before we got hurt. But people are sleeping on. I think people kind of forgot about how damn good Zion Williamson is. So that's another one that's the Pelicans are in a damn good spot. Talking about another one of just my favorite drafts here. I think in general, just another one that I did want to touch on. Oh man, the Grizzlies had an interesting draft. I think value-wise, what they pulled off is to kind of be applauded. The Grizzlies, obviously, we've spoken about this in the past before, about the Grizzlies just being one of the best front offices in the NBA. And they're one of these teams that you don't really question what they're doing. Now, I like David Roddy. I didn't have a first-rate grade on him, so that one kind of took everybody by surprise. But I think Jake LaRavia is somebody who is going to be able to step in and contribute from day one. I think he's kind of the perfect fit of guys. We spoke about needing, I think, Dylan Brooks is going to be on this team. He's a part of their core that they're going to see. But in terms of just getting more wings, they lost a guy like DeAnthony Melton, which is like they're going to be able to, I think they have enough talent on that team. DeAnthony Melton was extremely, one of the best, a really versatile defender, point of attack guy. Strangely, he's one of like the best defenders on staff across the league when you really watch him. But with the build that they have and guys in Memphis, they'll be able to survive on without what they're going to lose from DeAnthony Melton. But getting back to Jake LaRavia is somebody who, if you go back and watch the film, he's somebody who I think he's just going to flourish in that role. Once you get out of the lottery or in most drafts outside of that top 8 or 10, you're just looking for guys that can fill in good roles for you. Jake LaRavia shot it really well. I think he was above 40% on catch and shoots or around there somewhere. Defensively, he's an extremely smart and active defender. If you watch those Wake Forest games against Duke this year, he gave Paolo some hell. So he's somebody who's going to be able to switch between the forward positions and guard 3s and 4s. Somebody who also is an extremely good passer and just high feel for the game, and somebody who just makes good decisions with the ball in his hands, which, I think Memphis, you can just tell on the way that they value players and young players, or just even undervalued guys, like when they just went and picked out a guy like Kyle Anderson. But you can tell how they value guys, and Jake LaRavia, I think he's going to be able to fit into that really well for them. Also a pretty good weak side rim protector. So to get him at 19, trade up, I think what did they trade? 22 and 29 for them on that Memphis team that kind of, they have a bunch of young players on that team. They have Zaire Williams on that team. They also have, like we mentioned, Dylan Brooks. They have way more good players that they can actually play. We talk about like a guy like Xavier Tillman, who they kind of just used in that Minnesota series just because Steven Adams got played off of the court. But he's another one of these guys that the Grizzlies are just really deep, and Jake LaRavia is somebody who's also going to be able to come in and play a role for him. So I really love that pick for him. Kennedy Chandler, just like a screams Grizzlies pick.
He's going to replace. I think he's going to replace Tyus. I think Tyus is going to go get a bag somewhere.
I think they're going to. I think they got to keep Tyus if they let go of DeAnthony Melton. But
Tyus and Kennedy. I feel like that's kind of overkill there, right? You don't think so in terms of the market on 6-foot guards?
Definitely, he's a pretty good. He's a pretty good insurance policy, but I don't necessarily see. Ken Chandler is made to be that off ball rotation kind of point guard. And I definitely do see what you're talking about, but are they really expecting him to come in and contribute on day one? Probably
No,
not.
probably not. Yeah.
But I do see him as a like Tyus insurance so they don't lose him. But I do think just in terms of guys that he's also a really good point of attack defender. So I think just in terms like Ja isn't a great defender, but just having that type of depth, it's just such a Grizzlies pick. But you did want to talk about Kennedy on one of the actual breakdowns. But what did you make of him just in general?
I mean, he's somebody that that defense that he plays. He plays. It's intense. He's somebody who shows up for big games. Like Kennedy Chandler is, for me, was graded in the first round. So if you're looking at the Grizzlies board right now and you say, okay, that Roddy pick took me by surprise, they balanced it out with getting Kennedy Chandler where they got him because I had him in the top 25. So it's just like one of those players where the tenacity on defense, the ability to run an offense in a pinch, and he's somebody who can improve his shooting. He's going to be an NBA player. Like he's going to be somebody that's going to be a rotational piece for this Grizzlies team. You're going to look down the line in 2 years and be like, how'd they get him at 38? And, we're not questioning the Grizzlies on this show because they've shown the ability to identify talent on each ends of the draft, whether it's in the lottery or it's in the second round, a la Desmond Bane, things like that. So, I mean, Desmond Bane might have been end of the first, if I want to correct myself. But either way, it was a late pick, and they're good at identifying talent. He's somebody that he fits the mold of this team. I think that's the most important part. Like this team is kind of crafting an identity. And as we have gotten away from that in the NBA, a lot of teams, as they say, it's a copycat league. Like the Grizzlies have an identity. They're young, they're rugged, they fit the identity of the city that they're in. So I think that's very important. And he's somebody that's, from the area and played in the area. So he fits right in. I think that's a great pick for them.
Who else really had a good draft that you were kind of interested in, or just anybody else that kind of stood out to you on that side?
I mean, in terms of just other teams that had good drafts, I mean, everybody else had kind of, I think the Heat took a flyer on Jovic at 27. That's a good pick for them. I think if he develops the way he needs to develop, he's going to be a good piece down there in Miami. But I think we can start talking about some of the bonehead moves of the draft if you're up to that, because as many good moves and as many good drafts that we saw, there were some head scratches there. So like, do you have any off the top of your head? And we don't have to address the elephant in the room right now. Like we can rip that Band-Aid off a little later, or we can get right into it. But
let's get into it.
All right. Well, the New York Knickerbockers, those boys that play on 34th Street in between 7th and 8th Ave at Madison Square Garden. You might have heard of it. They essentially traded 2 lottery picks last night. They traded the 11th pick and then attached Jalen Duren to Kemba Walker in a salary dump for the Pistons, which, is a haul for them. Allegedly, these picks were traded to acquire cap space to offer Jalen Brunson, who, you may have heard his dad was hired by the Knicks. Leon Rose used to be his agent. Leon Rose, since becoming the GM of the Knicks, Leon Rose's son is now Jalen Brunson's agent. So there's a lot of things going on there that, maybe Jalen, if this was kind of what was going on, you could have gave us a discount. We didn't have to do all of that. But, Jalen Brunson, it seems to be the player that they have essentially traded 2 lottery picks for. And I mean, they've gotten back, I think, 8 tradable picks. We have not 8 picks, but we have 8 picks to trade. They got back 3 picks last night in the trades, first round picks, protected. Nobody really knows where they'll convey, and I'm not trying to get into that. They're still tradable pieces right now. So, looking like Jalen Brunson's on the horizon, do you see them being able to move any of these picks for anybody worth a damn?
Oh man, the fucking Knicks, man. Yeah, so first of all, let's just start here. This is 2 years in a row that they kind of just bailed on their first round pick. Now, my thing with the Knicks, and just in general, because this is one thing that I'm just not a fan of, and when it comes to roster construction, and it's one thing if you're coming in and like you can like kind of rectify it or try and defend it and say like when you're building, when you take over a team and you're trying to clean up the mess that another GM or president of basketball operations made. But the Knicks they like Leon Rose, all those guys, Worldwide Rest, whoever's calling the shots, in for the Knicks, they had control of this team last year. Now it comes into this part where it's just like, yo, if you have to clean up a mess that you made last summer yourself, I have to give you like a D and an F off of rip, regardless of like they got what 3 first-round picks for number 11. Like you can make the value argument on that side there first. You can say, okay, cool, yeah, they got 3 first round picks. You want to defend it in a vacuum? Okay, cool. This isn't in a vacuum though. You guys had control in this team. We wanted to keep the organization fluttering after a successful playoff team, and it's just like even if you want to criticize the signings that they made last season, it's just like, okay, cool. I can understand wanting to bring in some additional pieces to build on what you started, but they just the pieces that they're putting together, it never made sense from the beginning. So it's just like you have Julius Randle, you draft Obi Toppin, you're blocking Obi Toppin. Julius Randle probably needs to go. If we're talking about what we saw from Obi Toppin in the second half of last season, if we really want to see what Obi Toppin is going forward, Randle probably has to get out of there because there's no need for him on this team, and he's probably going to. The Knicks are still trying to find their long-term identity. Julius Randle probably isn't a part of that equation. We talk about Mitch Robinson. Mitch Robinson's a free agent this year. They still also have Nerlens Noel on contract. Why did you need Nerlens Noel? We just talked about the 2 other big men that they have, and then if you want to talk about Alec Burks, we signed D Rose. In general, this shit does not make sense. Now, it sounds like they tried their hardest to trade up for Jaden Ivey, which you want to applaud them and say, congratulations, you guys. Like, it seems like you guys did try as hard as you can. Kind of just gave Jalen Duren to the Pistons, which I mean, that's a completely different other story. But in general, it's just like, what are we doing here? Now, if we talk about what needs to happen long term with the Knicks, it's also like you still have to unload a couple of these guys. They traded away basically, what was it, like 4 first-round picks to get off of Kemba Walker? I mean, second-round picks to get off of Kemba Walker. So it's just like the pieces in general don't make sense. Now, trading away these picks to like go for Jalen Brunson, is Jalen Brunson the missing piece for this Knicks team? He's not. And I'm a huge Jalen Brunson fan, but we're still talking about an undersized guard here who like, and I'm a huge Jalen Brunson fan. I can understand the appeal if you had to trade like 3-4 first-round picks to trade up for a guy like Jaden Ivey. Jalen Brunson is also like 26, going on probably 27 at this point. So like he's a couple years older than a guy like RJ Barrett, and you can build with Jalen Brunson. You can. This is not to say that he doesn't have amazing basketball ahead of him, but as much of a Jalen Brunson fan as I am, it just comes down to the equation. It's just like him playing, and he looked like Jalen Brunson has to be incredibly happy that he played the Utah Jazz in the first round and just their absolutely porous perimeter defense and how amazing they made him look. And that's not to say that he wasn't good in the regular season, because Jalen Brunson has been underrated for some time now. He kind of shed that label of just being underrated, and now he's probably properly rated. But like with the Knicks, it's just like, even for next year, man, it's just like this team, if you're going to add a Jalen Brunson, you're still probably missing out on that true franchise-changing cornerstone piece, to where it's just like, are you also going to trade more picks to get off of guys like Noel? If you bring in a guard like Jalen Brunson, you're going to have to probably get off of D Rose as well. We're not even talking about the glut, which I think if we just talk about it being understandable on the Knicks side, is they do have a glut on the roster, and they didn't really have more spots for another rookie. If you're talking about it in general, Quentin Grimes wasn't getting enough minutes that we got. We saw what happened with Cam Reddish, who is also another part of this equation that we have on this team, who also came off the bench for like his first 10 to 15 games, barely even played or got a chance to play alongside RJ and the young core on that team. Deuce McBride kind of showed that he was too good for the G League. And you have guys like Rokas, who still is probably coming over. So it's just confusing in general. In a vacuum, I can understand what they were going for, but like you don't get that benefit of the doubt when you're cleaning up your own mess. So that's my thing with the Knicks. And they have great first-round picks, but it's just like, dude, you guys already have a bunch of these solid rotation players, which are valuable and a very good part. We spoke about, Memphis being able to hit on the margins and fill out their depth. the Knicks don't really need additional depth, and the picks that they got, they didn't get a future OKC first. They didn't get a future Detroit first. Without pulling it up right now, I know there's a Milwaukee first in there. I know there's a future there's a Detroit first in there. There's a future Denver pick. These aren't going to be franchise, and there's a lottery protection in those picks. So it's just like, what are we doing here? Like, those picks are probably just to add to the treasure chest. And that a star, request a trade one day, and you can just go overboard and just say, here, 1 million first round picks. But it's just in general, like the ideology and the path that they're on, it's just toggling between two paths right now. They kind of just got to pick a side.
Yeah, I mean, it was frustrating to watch in real time, as you can imagine. Last year, if you guys remember on the draft show, I kind of went through the same process of melting down, trying to figure out what the Knicks were doing. And I think, I can't give anybody the benefit of doubt. Nobody in the New York Knicks gets the benefit of doubt for me. I think we have to see what happens. I mean, if Jalen Brunson is the point guard, cool. He's the best point guard we've had since Mark Jackson, right? Like, I mean, shout out to Steph, obviously, but Marbury was a great show. But I mean, you think about that. Jalen Brunson will be here. He'll be a piece. Cool. You have RJ. You're gonna have to sign him. From there, there's treasure chest of first round picks. Like, what stars are gonna come available that are gonna be worth throwing all these picks at? Like, is Donovan Mitchell requesting a trade? Is a Jalen Brunson Donovan Mitchell backcourt even something that you want? Like, it's a very undersized backcourt. I mean, it would be our best backcourt in quite some time. But if you're running him, Brunson, and RJ out there, that's an undersized 1-2-3 lineup, I think. Who else is available? Like, obviously, Kyrie's about to blow up Brooklyn, but you're not going to go out there and get Kyrie to bring to this either. And, that would be the next thing to do, bring him over from Brooklyn, and now Kyrie's at the Garden. So I'm trying to make peace with that, and hopefully that doesn't happen, because if we're running Brunson, Kyrie lineups, explosive for sure, but it's not something I need to see long term. And then in terms of Julius Randle, if you're not trading Julius Randle, you have to get a point guard to run the show, because he cannot be the person running the team. We saw it worked in that bubble year or the year after the bubble, and next year, once the scouting report was out, he can't pass out of a double team. So his efficiency and everything sank back. It didn't even regress to the mean. Like, he plummeted last year. And I think we need somebody on this team. We've always needed a point guard, but we need somebody that's going to run this team and run the offense. So if you're going with Julius Randle, you have to have a bona fide point guard on this team. So I understand that, and they seem content with running it back with him. But to your point, the glut of all of these players we have, like Obi Toppin proved that he needs minutes. I don't know if he's a starter yet, but he proved he needs more than 15 minutes a game. So do they re-sign Mitchell Robinson? Like, what is the outlook here? And I mean, now we have to wait a week to see what happens in that moratorium, the tampering period, to see what happens there and see what type of deals they can cook up, because as this roster is currently constructed, it's a mess still. Alec Burks does not need to play point guard on this team anymore. So I don't have an issue with Alec Burks other than he was playing fucking point guard.
Solid player.
But yeah, like he is a good role player in the NBA. Like, he is somebody that if he's utilized right, you don't have no issues with Alec Burks. But we ran him at the point guard last year. I mean, and D Rose obviously is a roster piece on here as well. Like, he kind of has to go, and I understand Tibbs, that's your guy, but he wasn't healthy at all last year, and this is a reoccurring theme, and we gave him a contract. So they're cleaning up their messes, like you said, so they don't deserve the benefit of the doubt.
What if they don't get Jalen Brunson? Then what if they don't get Jalen Brunson? Then this is like, now what?
They don't get Jalen Brunson. I mean, everybody tune in to that episode, because if Jalen Brunson re-signs with the Mavericks, I'm having a real live meltdown for 22 minutes, man. It's gonna be Mad Dog Russo-esque. Like, I don't know where else to go with it, because I might have an aneurysm if we don't get Jalen Brunson. But like, if we don't get Jalen Brunson, we get somebody good. Am I upset? Maybe it's a smokescreen, right? Like, maybe they know we're getting somebody that we're not. But I mean, it seems like, I don't know if the Knicks are smart enough to smokescreen like these teams did in the draft.
Yeah, so I mean, that's enough on the nigga block here. Shout out to Trevor Kills, though. I do think,
Yeah.
I also don't know where he plays. I don't know where he plays next year.
He does not feel a need.
I think he's gonna probably spend a lot of time up in Westchester, and I do think that's a pretty good development route. I think Trevor Kills is an NBA player, so that's definitely somebody who the Knicks are going to have to consolidate the roster eventually. So that's something that they're going to have to take care of, just so we do get there. Just a couple other notable picks that we can touch on as we're on here that we did find interesting. Let's shout out to Mark Williams, number 15. I definitely love that pick. I think the Hornets drafted Durant at 13, got some good value, picked up some assets, and then picked up Mark Williams at 15. So I do think that's a pretty good value from them. I do think just in terms of what he's going to bring them, that vertical lob threat, I think he's a better prospect than Kai Jones is. And I do think that he's an underrated guy, strong feel for the game, better touch than he gets credit for, and also a really good passer. He's going to make LaMelo's life extremely a lot more easier just in terms of how effective and compact that his screens do set. So I did love that fit for them right there. Another one that I did want to touch on real quick, just in terms of fit here. I want to say shout out to the Wizards. I do think Johnny Davis is a pretty good pick for them. One of those just fits that were just heavily mocked. Johnny Davis at 15. I think he kind of is going to be able to mesh pretty well with Bradley Beal in the same front court, just in terms of what he's going to be able to bring on defense. And I think Beal, if Bradley Beal stays in Washington, caveats obviously, but I do think Beal is good enough of a passer to really unlock some of the other stuff that Johnny is able to do when he gets himself open off ball. He's a really smart cutter. I don't think he's going to have any trouble being able to get easy duck-ins and use the gravity when teams are really focusing on a 30-point scorer in Bradley Beal. So I also do love that. I love the shot that they took on a guy like Yannick Sosa, who I watched a lot of him. He's somebody who was projected to be a top 15 pick pre-draft, preseason before the season started, and he kind of just had a rough season overseas. But I do think he is somebody who is going to be able, I think it's a long-term developmental piece, but I think defensively he has the tools to be a really disruptive shot blocker. And to get him in the 50s, I think that's a really good fit for them. Developmental piece and just a project to work on who, if you get the right center, they still do have a guy like Porzingis, which I kind of just forgot that he was on that team, but he's going to be able to do some funky things, and there's a potential where he has a legit NBA skill, and he's going to be able to switch and also be a weak side rim protector. But any other notable picks? What do we think about AJ Griffin sliding to 16, a little bit outside of the lottery that we did think? I forget where I had AJ on my final board, but
it was top 10 for me.
Adam Knife. So you had him top 10. He falls to 16. What do you think about him slipping and him falling and his fit in with the Hawks, who, I think it's going to be interesting to see. It seems like they said that they're building around DeAndre Hunter as one of their pieces, but I think he's somebody who put him with a guy like Trae Young. Trae Young, he's going to be able to hit those skip passes. If you kind of have to help off Trae a little bit when you intensive defense, and AJ is going to be able to hit that corner three with regularity and easily. So, and I think it's kind of a good spot for him to kind of, even with some of those other wings that they have, it's a pretty good developmental spot to where I think he might be able to make a better impact and grow alongside that core that they have in Atlanta.
Yeah, I mean, he's not going to be forced into a role that's above him right now. I think what's going to be beneficial to him is, like you said, playing behind some of those guys. He has the ability to get his base back. I think one of the red flags for him was health. I think being able to really grow and get his body right and get back some of that athleticism that may have been lost due to the rash of injuries he went back to back, and then playing along somebody like you said, like Trae, who's going to have that gravity to where you're going to be open in the corner for a three because you would rather him shoot it than Trae. I think that's where he's going to be able to flourish. I do think he plays a bit of the same position of somebody like DeAndre Hunter on this team, but I would like to see some of the funky lineups they're going to be able to run out with some of these defenders that they have now, and I think it just bolsters some of the defensive capabilities of the Hawks if AJ Griffin comes in and he's right.
Yeah, so I mean, another draft I wanted to talk about real quick, the Timberwolves draft. I mean, I didn't know what to. I mean, we didn't speak about.
I have no clue what to make of that draft. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, I like the Walker Kessler. We didn't talk about him at all, but like, was that a position of need for them?
It was. It definitely was. They definitely needed some rim protection. I think the further question, and which is why it's kind of just I had him lower. I had him as a second round pick. I understand the appeal. He had one of the most insane shot blocking seasons from a college big man in like years or decades even. I remember seeing it. I'm not exactly sure, but it's been some time. He's an extremely good drop defender in as a big. Now that's kind of brings into question here when you have a franchise center here, and it's funny because the Timberwolves, he never even got his foot off. But shout out to Justin Patton. He was a Tibbs first round pick a few years back. But I think the question that just comes into choosing a guy who is he's position locked at a 5. He's a 5 all the way. Kessler can move. Like, he's not the most immobile big man ever, but he's a drop big, and he's somebody who is also like you're gonna have to actualize him and optimize him playing drop defense. Now we talk about the upside on that pick, using the number 22 pick, and it sounds like they really loved him and they fell in love with him. But you talk about Walker Kessler using him at 22. Cat plays 35 minutes a game. You're using at the center, which is his best position. Cat is he is versatile enough of a player in general. On offense, it's not even a problem. Defensively, I think the reason why the Timberwolves surprised so many people this year and the change of defensive philosophy that they had compared to how they were playing Cat previously was they had Cat playing the high wall defense that they did on that team, having him show a lot more and play higher up on ball screen actions, which is what he does best. Now, he's still not the best defender that you don't want to leave him there because guards can cook him a lot, but using a pick at that point on a center that probably only has the potential to play 13 minutes a game, you got to really think that he can play alongside Cat. I don't necessarily think that's a long-term fit, and I think even for a team that has aspirations to continue being a playoff team and win playoff series down the line, I don't think that's a formula for success in the playoffs, playing Cat with a guy like Walker Kessler. But was it a need? It definitely was a need. They needed to get bigger. I do think he helps them there. I probably, if you get him in the second round, I probably am I'm better with that pick. But I just think in terms of, like, if you want to take a second round pick, I would have preferred a guy like Ismail Kamagate, the French big who went to Denver, who I think that's a perfect slot for him. He went 46. I think it's a perfect slot for him in Denver to play alongside a guy like Nikola Jokic, and what he's going to be able to bring. There's more switchability in a profile like that, and I think there's a lot more, just juice athletically as a potential playoff player. So that's one thing that I kind of it doesn't make sense to me. Wendell Moore is a guy who, I'm a fan of watching him, just the improvements that he did show over the season, that over his career at Duke. Somebody who was a heralded prospect who came in with a lot of hype, struggled his first couple years, but somebody who's one of these guys who's versatile, can play on and off the ball. So I do think he's gonna, however they want to build this team in the future remains to be seen. But if you want, Ant polarizing the ball and monopolizing the ball and having the ball in his hands a lot, Wendell Moore is a guy. He's the type of wing that you're going to need, somebody who is going to be able to make a lot of good passes. He can run some backup point on the second unit for you. The shot showed some improvement. I still do think it's probably going to the mechanics can get a little wonky at times, and just his footwork at times can be a little nasty and unbalanced, which can lead to some issues for him on that side. But in general, I do think that I really do love the Wendell Moore pick. But in general, it's just like one of those fits that, I'm not in love with it due to the Walker Kessler pick. But shout out to Tim Connelly. He's a pretty good drafter, and he kind of showed his value in Denver. So, he's one of those decision makers and president of basketball operation guys that does deserve some type of benefit of the doubt. And I might not have been the biggest Walker Kessler fan, it fills a need, and he's going to be able to at least soak up 15 minutes sooner than later, which is probably what they needed.
And I think probably one of the last things we need to touch on is just one of the biggest haters of the night. Skip Bayless finding a way to throw shade on a kid's dream. Max Christie was drafted.
I didn't even see this. I don't even know what's I got Skip Bayless blocked on Twitter, so it's probably for the best.
Max Christie, Max Christie is one of those. We spoke about him as if we didn't know if he would be ready to play at the next level. Obviously, just with a lackluster year at Michigan State, he was drafted. I want to say number 35 to the Lakers. So he didn't have the best shooting year last year, and I think pulling up the tweet right now, I think Skip Bayless goes. Lakers acquire a second round pick. Take Michigan State's Max Christie, who shot only 32% from three last season. Perfect. He'll fit right in with LeBron and Westbrook. That is dedication to a craft right there because
it's just so unnecessary.
It's unnecessary. He only has one pitch. Skip Bayless been going to the fastball for 10 years and it's still coming in. Probably longer than that. For LeBron, longer than that, and it's still clocking in about 98 miles an hour because he finds
it's not coming that fast. It's not coming that fast.
He's finding new ways to hate. This is how you gonna shit on Max Christie draft night and then still tie it back to LeBron. Like he's a wizard with that. I mean, he needs to stop, and it's never going to stop because people still tune in for it. But it's like, Max Christie to the Lakers, they bought that pick. I do think with the right players around Max Christie, if he can return to the shooting form that he had in high school, it adds to the shooting for the Lakers. That's my expert analysis there.
What do you think it'll fit? What do you just think it'll fit for Max Christie? Like hateration, a lot of hateration in this dancery from Skip. But what do you just make it fit? Because I think Max kind of just ended up in an incredible spot for him. He's gonna have a chance to play early and often, which which is great for him. I do think the attention that guys like Bron and AD and question mark Russ if Russ continues over there, but I think Max Christie is one of those guys to where
he's gonna be open.
He's gonna be open, and going back and watching this tape. I did a last minute deep dive on Max Christie towards the end of the draft cycle, and like I said, you watch the shot. The shot is beautiful, so I think like the mechanics are beautiful. He's one of those guys that even when he shoots, you think it's going in, and this year it was never going in. But it's just one of those things where he's like shot wise, that's a shot that you would probably invest in long term, that you could feel confident in. I do think it's going to make for some interesting lineups. I think you're going to be able to. It just kind of, he's a really good fit for that Lakers team because, like I said, if Russ is on that team or not, you can throw out some lineups of Christie and a guy like Austin Reeves, and you can have them. I think Christie's going to be able to guard good enough at the NBA level. He's not a complete slouch on that level, but he brings some desperate shooting on that team. So the Lakers are going to have to bring a lot more shooting on that side. So it's going to be interesting to see. But he's going to have some platform and an avenue to get playing time early and often.
Yeah, no, I think he landed in a spot that was as rough of a year as he had at Michigan State. It worked out for him in terms of the not from the money, obviously, but in terms of just where he landed. I think he's in a good spot.
I mean, a couple of these guys. I think another one of my takeaways, just like huge takeaways, and what's obvious, especially closing the chapter, closing the book on the 2022 class, and just thinking about a couple of the most surprising picks. You have PBJ, Pep Bowen Jr. going 28th. You have Caleb Houston going high in the second round. You have Peyton Watson. What did he go? 30th, I believe. So it kind of just shows you, in general, that these NBA teams seem to value. I mean, not in the case of Jaden Hardy, I guess, but it seems like these NBA teams do seem to value, high school pedigree and those high school year of, just ranking services. And a lot of these guys who Pat Baldwin Jr. was a top 5 guy in the class just last year. He's another one of these guys who, I don't know if he's going to defend, but I know what he is going to be able to do, and that's going to be able to shoot. He's like 6'10", 6'11". He's going to be able to shoot, like we said. The defense is going to be a question mark, but being able to go to Golden State and an extremely low pressure situation is incredible for him. So that was another one of just the plain takeaways of draft night is these NBA teams kind of, just watching college, and you can see how nasty some of these college fits are. And just, I think sometimes with Peyton Watson, even who off the top of my head, I think he averaged 3 or 4 points off the top of my head. And he kind of just got caught up Johnny Juzang going back to school, after entering the combine or throwing his name into last year's class after they made their run at UCLA. I think Peyton Watson originally declared UCLA before that happened, and Juzang going back kind of just, it put him in a precarious and not a great situation, just playing time and just fit wise for Peyton Watson. But just in terms of like the raw defensive playmaker and being having some ability to pass, I can understand. It makes sense why these teams do take a swing on guys where that's the other thing when we talk about just front offices and NBA teams. They're not just scouting guys for like 4 or 5 months after the tournament. There's a lot of NBA fans who just turn on the tournament, or they just turn on the most marquee matchups and just watch these guys, and they'll make up their opinion on what they think they are as players based on those just little or little background on them. But these NBA teams and front offices, they've been following these guys for years. We didn't really talk about Shaedon yet, which we could probably touch on after as well, but they've been watching these guys for some time, which is a part of the reason why it just gives them a little bit more comfort level. And sometimes you can see just in terms of the fit that they have in high school and what they're able to do in high school, just placates them and just highlights in a better light what they'd be able to do at the NBA level.
Yeah, man. I think we can touch on the Shaedon part as well. I think in terms of where he landed, I think it's a perfect spot for him. He's somebody who, he didn't get to play obviously in college, but like you said, with that high school film and some of the stuff he did on some of the circuits, he projects to have some of those star qualities that was worth taking the risk on. And I think, being able to play in that backcourt with some of the players that Portland has, I think he's going to have an opportunity to get minutes early. If he is, even close to where he was, just in terms of production wise for high school, like not obviously that translating completely to the NBA, but in terms of just that same level of explosion, that same feel for the game, and he continues to improve. I mean, I think Portland has probably secured the player in this draft with probably the highest upside.
Yeah, I think Portland is a really good landing spot, just developmental wise for him. I think they just showed you another guy who's an extremely big question mark coming out a couple years is Anthony Simons, and they took their time with Anthony Simons, and there wasn't a lot of playing time for him early. They didn't throw him and just say, "Here's 30 minutes for you out the gate." Kind of just took their time with him and let him grow into that role. And Anthony Simons showed somebody who could be a perennial 20-point scorer last year, just like in the games that Dame was out. So I think Portland is a pretty good landing spot for Shaedon to really unlock that upside. We can talk about long-term fit, but I don't even think that's kind of relevant at this point about the fit. I do think he kind of has some upside to be a 3. He's going to have to really have kind of a mentality change and lock in a lot more and just use his tools that he has on defense to be a much more disruptive defender when he is in college. I mean, when opposed to what we saw him do in AAU and yeah, AAU for sure. That's the only damn tape we got of Shaedon Sharpe, but I think it's a pretty good landing spot for him. Last part that I just wanted to talk on for just the landing spots for guys was Jaden Hardy, who is another one of these guys who kind of just was the biggest loser, just in terms of probably lost himself a lot of money over the season. But another one of those guys who I do think he showed a lot of scoring prowess, even if it was on not great efficiency. But we're talking about a teenage guy who's playing several levels up and against guys who are stronger than him, older than him. But I do think the scoring prowess and just the creation upside is there. He's one of the most versatile scorers in this class. I still do think, even if he only went 39th, he's going to be able to score effectively. The dribble, I think he has one of the most effective dribble capacities and just handles in the class, to where he's going to be able to create strong separation on his shot. We might be possibly talking about some long-term Jalen Brunson upsides for Dallas. And if they do lose a Jalen Brunson, I do think, it might not be on the best of efficiency, but I do think in probably like a year or two, or even on the second half of like his rookie season, I think he might have a ability to actually, come in and contribute and get buckets. Playing off a guy like Luka is going to make his life a lot more easier. He's not going to have to, take 5 dribbles every time he takes a shot and create his basket every time. I think he's going to shoot pretty damn well on spot ups. He's also showed some high level pull up jump shot in this class. Probably one of the better pull up jump shots in this class. So I do think for a guy that Dallas isn't going to need right away, depending on if they bring back Brunson, but even playing behind a guy like Spencer Dinwiddie, who's going to be on that team. So I think Jaden Hardy has really high, a really potent potential as a long-term scorer, and has range on that shot. The defense, isn't going to be great, and I do worry about the finishing for him. He's not the best athlete, and he kind of is undersized. But you play with a guy like Luka, who has the functional versatility to play up on defense. They're going to have a lot of other wings on that team, which you're always going to have. You got guys like DFS on that team, and they were able to basically cobble aside a pretty good wing defense and a defense that brought them to the Western Conference Finals. So I think they have a good idea of how to just placate that and work around a shortcomings. And like I said, Jalen Brunson isn't the biggest guy either, who we've spoken about a lot on this pod. But, I think he just kind of have to work on the shot selection. And, going through the G League Ignite tape for a guy like Jaden Hardy, you can see the flashes of him improving throughout the season, especially on that second season. And I think he averaged, 17, 18 points as an 18-year-old. And I think if you put him in college, not only are we talking about a lottery pick, we're talking about somebody who just the perception around a guy like Jaden Hardy is extremely different than what it is going into 35. But for the type of pedigree and upside that he has, this probably is going to put an extremely big chip on his shoulder. And I think the fit and playing off a guy like Luka is going to be incredible for Jaden Hardy. So he's somebody who definitely has potential. And I think shout out to CJ Marcasani, who we had on the pod recently for the draft breakdown, and he kind of just spoke about how flat this draft was, and you could say anywhere between like 15 and like 40 range, you can kind of see these guys fall anywhere in between that range. So, I think the draft slot wasn't the best for him, which kind of sucks because, it kind of just comes down to him losing his money. But I think, once the dust settles, I think he's going to get a lot of buckets in Summer League. I could see him making like a Summer League all first team pretty easily, just with how good of a scorer he is. And, just talking about that long-term fit, I think he might have ended up in a fit that's much better for actualizing the type of player that he needs to be and just working out some of the kinks and shot selection and, hunting his own shot that he'll need to work on. So, sucks that he lost some bread on it, but I do think he's going to be able, I think he'll get a second contract in the league, which will end up, making up some of the money that he lost on draft night.
Yeah, I mean, I think just going forward, even as we start looking into future draft cycles and start looking at these trends, I think it's worth noting and looking into, some of these high level prospects out of high school, top 10, top 20 prospects that end up going to get that money a little bit earlier, doing things like G League, Ignite, or going overseas, or playing overtime league, just things like that, where they're getting a little bit money, getting money earlier, to skipping the college route. It's interesting to see, there'll be some case studies done on that to see how much money has been lost by some of these prospects by going to play against just more physically imposing people instead of kids their age in the college realms, and it's gonna then pose the question: is this more harmful or helpful for their long-term basketball future? We know financially it helps, and I love that they had the option, but in instances like this, is this the most beneficial route for some of these players for their development?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's a pretty good way to end it here, and we can finish off on just a couple of the undrafted guys. And so, I mean, out of the undrafted crop of guys, who surprised you most that they weren't drafted? Who do you think has some potential to be a priority guy and get a two-way? Everybody's going to be looking for this year's Jose Alvarado, but there's always a bunch of guys who fall through the cracks and are able to actually come through and actually play a role, and whether it's a two-way, kill the G League and then start fighting for some minutes in the NBA. But other guys that didn't get drafted, who surprised you the most that they didn't get drafted, and who do you think are the best guys to not be drafted in general?
I mean, there's a lot of namesakes in this draft. If we're getting old, so we're starting to see players that we saw play have kids that are now in the damn league. But it's like, a player like Ron Harper Jr., who he's physically imposing, and he was obviously in a role that he would never be in the NBA, but he was the burden. He bared the brunt of the burden for those Rutgers squads. I think he has good two-way ability at the next level in terms of just being a solid defender and somebody who can shoot it if he needs to. I think he's somebody that I would have taken a flyer on in the second round. I don't think he's somebody that probably should have went undrafted. Trying to think. There's a few that went there. I think your boy, Julian Champagne. I think he signed with the Sixers. If
Let
I
that
if I
fit.
remember
Yep, let
that
that fit.
love
Yep.
that correct. He's somebody who showed the ability to score the ball at the collegiate level, and production is something that matters. And I feel like with the draft process being a little ageist and things like that, we tend to forget that some of these older players have produced consistently for numerous a number of years on the college level, and we kind of just throw that out. Um, and then I think one of the funniest ones to me, and I guess in terms of obviously now I think it's going to work. The Grizzlies went and signed Kenny Lofton Jr. And I have no idea what to make of that, but the Grizzlies did it, so I'm
He got
all
the
in.
right
I
idea
feel
though.
like, yeah, like they got the right idea. And I think that's an interesting prospect to watch. And which undrafted free agents stood out to you?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a couple guys that definitely stood out to me. Gotta say shout out to John Butler Jr. He kind of has one of the craziest just profiles in general. Shout out to the FSU pipeline and Leonard Hamilton, obviously. But we're talking about like a 7'1", like 80. I'm not. I think that's what his dimensions are. But he has potential. He moves his feet really good for somebody that high. And it's gonna be. I don't think he signed a G League. I mean, a two-way or a summer league deal with anybody yet. But it'll be interesting to see where he goes. So I do think he's gonna be an interesting developmental guy. We spoke about John Montero. He signed with the Knicks. He's another one of those guys who I do think he's going to be able to get buckets in summer league, and kind of he might spend a lot of time in the G League. And if it's not possible that he's an NBA guy, he's definitely going to have a long term, career overseas, getting a lot of buckets and making a lot of money in those leagues. Another guy for me, Darion Sebron, who I had him in my mid 40s, but NC State guy, pretty interesting. He's just one of the more interesting prospects in general in his class. As somebody who is like 6'5", I think he's like 6'7", 6'8". But he played point guard a lot. He played point guard during the NBA Combine. He played a lot of point guard for NC State on that team, so he can really handle the ball. Really ferocious. I think he's going to be able to attack downhill. I think he has defensive capabilities to defend at an NBA level. He just can't shoot. So I think that's kind of what bit him in the ass when it came down to getting drafted. So that's the number one. I think Alondis Williams is another guy who I kind of thought would might kind of sneak on to a team somewhere and get drafted. And another one that kind of just surprised me, I think the obvious one who did get drafted was Justin Lewis out of Marquette, somebody who showed a lot of improvement over his season right now. And I do think he's somebody who I think is going to be able to score. And just his improvement, I think he also has really good touch for what he was able to show early in his career. So he's somebody who not exactly. I got to check where he signed, but I do think that's somebody who probably going to have a pretty good chance, and I think he has one of the highest likelihoods to steal some NBA minutes in his future. But yeah, man, I think that'll wrap us up for this episode here. I mean, Raz, any final takes, any final thoughts? Free agency is coming up. Who else that we might be looking out to, or anything else on the periphery in terms of just like biggest question marks for agency, or what teams just like has the most question marks going
There's
into the moratorium period.
look, there's not that much cap space out there this year, which is going to make for a very interesting market. We're going to see how teams cobble together to move pieces around to get some of these players. I mean, obviously you got people like Bradley Beal who've opted out. got the Kyrie and the Nets situation. So in the next couple of days, we could have a lot of content for you guys, just in terms of what's happening there. Obviously, we're gonna watch the Knicks and watch for any potential meltdowns of me about that. And then if you start looking into summer league, that's coming on the horizon. You know, there's gonna be a lot of who's gonna be the players that make it out of summer league that get roster spots that that weren't on our horizon. And I think it's just that part of the summer where, for the most part, everybody's hopeful about their teams, and come training camp, everybody's 0-0, and we know how that changes very quickly. So I'm very excited about this summer. I think this draft class has a lot of talent to offer to the league. It's just about everybody finding the right spot.
Yeah, man. So that's going to wrap us up. We are definitely out of here. Shout out to everybody that did support us through this draft cycle. We do appreciate everybody that showed love and checked out the videos. If you wanted the new subscribers, we appreciate y'all rocking on and coming on with us, man. We got a lot more content. This is only the beginning for us. We're getting our feet wet, learning what works and what doesn't work. But, we're going to definitely bring you guys a lot more content in the future, heavy and often. And like I said, shout out to everybody rocking with us. We're going to be back soon with some more some more content. We're going to start that 2023 NBA draft cycle even earlier than ever. And Mr. Draft Season Podcast, Sean 5K, Raz, we out of here, man.